Hello everyone, this is David Larson. I'm the Associate Chair for Performance Improvement in the Department of Radiology at Stanford University, and this is the Radiology Improvement Team Education Program. Today's topic is Introduction to Reliability. As we've discussed several times in this series, a process is where an input is transferred into an output by people using certain methods and tools working in certain facilities. A process has defined objectives, meaning the output is supposed to look a certain way, and it has a defined approach, which is what makes it a process. Now, there are a few harsh realities about processes, and many of these we've mentioned before. The first harsh reality is that variability is naturally inherent in every process. In other words, we don't hit the mark every time as much as we wish it were otherwise. Second, unless you've made a sustained, deliberate attempt to measure and decrease variation, the variation is almost certainly higher than you think. This usually comes as a shock to people who have never had to meaningfully improve a process before, so sometimes it takes a long time for people to look at the data and really view how things are going on before they start to believe this. Hopefully by now you've had enough experience with improvement that you've accepted this difficult reality. Third, as we've quoted Dr. Paul Batalden before, every process is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. Now, it's not necessarily designed to get the results that you want, and in fact, it may not even be designed at all. But if you want to know how good a process is, look at its results. And if you want different results, then you need to change the process. Fourth, some processes are designed to get better results than others. Just like a backhoe is designed to move more earth than a shovel, or a cheetah is designed to run faster than a gazelle. By virtue of the methods and tools that they use, some processes are capable of reliably producing better or more consistent results than others. Processes that tend to produce inconsistent or poor results can be termed low reliability processes, and processes that tend to consistently produce excellent results can be termed high reliability processes. And finally, harsh reality number 5 is that people make mistakes. In fact, they tend to make mistakes on a relatively frequent and predictable basis. For example, on average, in real-world conditions, people tend to make simple arithmetic errors 3% of the time, even with self-checking. A monitor or inspector will fail to recognize an error 10% of the time. People will make errors of commission, like misreading a label, about 3 out of every 1,000 times, and will make errors of omission, like forgetting an important item in a handoff, approximately 10% of the time. They will omit items embedded in a procedure less often, but will still do it about 0.3% of the time. And when stress, fatigue, danger, and rapid development are added to the mix, error rates go up dramatically. Unfortunately, this is true for all of us, no matter how much education or training we have or how hard we try. We still make mistakes. This is a difficult challenge to overcome. How can we solve this? Well, let's think about the purpose of a business. The purpose of a business is to consistently do something well. It's not to hire perfect employees. Therefore, to achieve reliable results, we must design processes that function reliably even with imperfect people, rather than expecting employees to never make mistakes. If you have a process that only functions correctly when everyone does their jobs perfectly, then you have an unreliable process. On the other hand, if you have ways to identify and correct mistakes before they result in a defective product or harm to the patient, or if you can prevent them in the first place, then you have a reliable process. Therefore, it's critical to make mistakes visible so that you can correct them and correct their causes so they won't happen again in the future. Reliability is a concept that comes out of industrial engineering that quantifies how often a process works correctly. It may be stated how often things are done incorrectly. For example, 10 to the minus 1 is scientific notation for 0.1 or 10%. It means that the wrong thing happens 10% of the time, or 1 defect out of 10, meaning that things are done right 90% of the time. 10 to the minus 2 means 1 defect out of 100, or 99% reliability. 10 to the minus 3 means 1 defect out of 1,000, or 99.9% reliability, and so forth. As we've discussed, some processes are more reliable than others. In general, there are 3 ways you can improve reliability: by relying on individual skill, procedures, and systems and organizational culture. By individual skill, we mean the learned ability to carry out predetermined results. This is expertise. By procedures, we mean a series of actions conducted in a certain order or manner. While skill relies on the individual to figure out the best way, a procedure boils it down to specific steps. And by systems, we mean technology, tools, facilities, and other mechanisms that enable reduced reliance on human performance. Note this is different than what we meant by systems in the previous lecture. Here, we mean infrastructure like automated systems or computer systems, for example. And we won't focus on organizational culture in this tutorial. There's a rule of thumb that generally holds for how reliable each of these approaches is. In general, when you rely on individual skill, the best you can do is roughly about 10 to the minus 1 reliability, or getting it right about 95% of the time. This is through basic standardization, education, training, and feedback. And beyond that, you need higher reliability mechanisms. So individual skill is a level 1 reliability strategy. Well-developed and well-accepted standardized procedures will get you to roughly 10 to the minus 2 reliability, or getting it right about 99.5% of the time. This is through well-developed processes with standardized techniques, embedded decision aids, color coding, reminders, etc. This is level 2 reliability. Well-developed systems and organizational culture can get you to 10 to the minus 3 reliability and beyond, which means making a mistake less than about 1 out of 2,000 attempts. Traditionally in medicine, we relied most heavily on individual skill. There were masters who developed expertise over many years of practice who would share that expertise with others. This served us well when there weren't nearly as many moving parts as there are today. But modern healthcare is now much more complex. There's much more advanced technology, many more people, and many more processes at work. Therefore, a modern healthcare operation might be compared to other highly complex operations like an aircraft carrier. A carrier must safely land aircraft every 45 seconds at night with lights dimmed in heavy seas with a deck slick with seawater and fuel, sitting on top of tons of explosive munitions and fuel, as well as a nuclear reactor, all operated by 20-year-old kids. How do they do it? Through a combination of individual skill, procedures, and systems and culture. If you look closely, you will see the tremendous amount of skill that's required for each role. You look and you'll see how many of the steps are prescribed and that they need to be performed in a specific way. Look at the amazing amount of engineering that goes into the equipment, the machinery, and other systems that they use. Even the color of their uniforms carries a specific meaning. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages of relying on each approach to achieving reliability. Advantages to relying on individuals is that people tend to be good at problem solving. We're flexible. We can work autonomously. People tend to be readily available, and you can hold individuals accountable for their work. Disadvantages are that people tend to make frequent mistakes. They tend to be inefficient and imprecise, and their skill wanes over time, so it needs to be maintained. The main advantage to using procedures is that they enable increased reliability through standardized techniques, which can be inexpensive to develop. However, procedures tend to be sensitive to details. They often need to be adhered to precisely. They require effort to learn, and they have to be organized and maintained and then made available to the staff. The main advantage to using systems is that they enable high levels of reliability. They're usually fast and allow for information processing that's tedious or impossible to do by hand, like a computer system, and they often dramatically improve communication. The main disadvantages include that once they're built, they tend to be inflexible. They're often expensive and take time to design and build, so it often isn't even an option to implement a system fix right away. So here are some examples of each of these. This is a graph of the winning height in the high jump in the Olympics over the history of the modern Olympics. The winning height at the first Olympics was 5'11". The technique that was used for that was the scissors technique. Over the years, this evolved into the Western roll, which allowed athletes to clear well over 6 feet. This evolved into the straddle, which was then perfected over the coming 2 decades. This allowed athletes to clear over 7 feet, but was technically very difficult to accomplish. In 1968, Dick Fosbury won the gold medal with a new technique going over backwards, which was named the Fosbury flop. The technique was perfected by Javier Sotomayor from Cuba, who in 1993 became the first and only human to ever clear 8 feet. Note how the techniques improved over the years, with the center of gravity moving lower and lower. When done correctly with a flop, the center of gravity actually never does pass over the bar. And when relying on individual skill for performance, excellence is attained through coaching and practice. Standardized procedures are what we most commonly think of when we think lean, so we won't spend too much time here. But one thing to note is that Toyota has a program to train individuals to use the standardized techniques for every job. The program is called Training Within Industry, and it's critical to their success. Most people don't realize that one might say that Toyota is a large training company that happens to also build cars. And finally, we also won't say much about automated systems except to say that that's where you can really achieve high levels of reliability. For example, modern commercial airliners have such sophisticated flight control systems that they can literally fly themselves. Okay, so if we have three basic approaches to a process, it begs the question, how do we know which one we should use? Well, here's an example. Do you know what is the common problem associated with transporting your bike on the top of a car? If you're a cyclist, or if you have friends who are cyclists, you almost certainly will know the answer to this question. The answer is the feared bicycle garage collision. Now, you may laugh and say, how could someone possibly make this mistake? But if you think about it, it's not too hard to see how this could happen. You can remember that it's on top of the car all the way home until the moment when you're about to pull in the garage, when something else distracts you. Then your autopilot will take over and you will do what you always do and drive into the garage. It's a known error, and if you look it up on the internet, you will see or read about many examples. As someone who is designing a new process, it's your job to think about all the possible ways it could go wrong and then design a process that will prevent all of those things from happening. So how might we prevent this error? Well, one strategy that is not a strategy at all is to tell people to try harder. Tell the driver to not do it again, or to restrict the privileges after the error. This is not helpful. The moment that happens, they know that they need to not do this again. Telling them doesn't help them. A level 1 approach would be to post a reminder or to hang a mirror above the garage or to post a sign or hang tag in the car. You can find these solutions on the internet, but they tend not to be very reliable as they tend to become wallpaper. Since they're there for so long, you start to ignore them. A level 2 approach is the one that most people use, which is to place the garage door opener in the glove compartment when you put your bikes on top, or to place a potted plant or other large object in front of the garage when you go out, or to buy an electronic alert that's available on the internet. All these will help, but if you really want to solve the problem, you should just buy a bigger car and put the bikes inside. Now, you may not be able to afford a bigger car, or it may not fit in your garage, which is fine, but you have to accept that if you decide to use a lower level reliability solution for whatever reason, you will have to accept the higher associated risks. To wrap up, I'll finish by saying that whether you know it or not, there is an implicit contract that exists between frontline workers and their leaders. That is, individuals on the front line should do their best to do great work, and leaders should make it as easy as possible for individuals to do their great work. Now, if you look at the three approaches to reliability, you realize that individuals really only have over their control skill, and even that is not completely under their control. And they might have some input into procedures, but they definitely have no or little control, minimal control over the systems that are used. Leaders, on the other hand, have control over training, over the procedures, and over the systems. Therefore, when there's a performance problem, well, it's tempting to blame those on the front line. The reality is that consistent, excellent performance is really a matter of good leadership. In summary, variability is naturally inherent in every process. Some processes are designed to get better results than others. Lower level reliability strategies focus exclusively on individual performance. Intermediate level reliability strategies focus on standardized procedures, and high level reliability strategies focus on systems. In reality, though, most improvement projects move through all three of these levels, starting with feedback and basic standardization, moving through to develop standard work, and finally culminating with well-developed systems. Thank you for your attention. This is David Larson with the Radiology Improvement Team Education Program.